Hey everyone, and welcome back to Tap and Turn Gamings. I'm Jay, and this is part 2 of my Prossh Skyraider of Kher EDH deck. So let's get right into it. This is where I will be basically explaining the card choices I've made, how they work well together, so on and so on. So, my commander. I'm sure a lot of you know him, Prossh Skyraider of Kher. He's a 6-cost 5/5 flying dragon. When you cast him, you put X01 red Kobold creature tokens named Kobolds of Kher onto the battlefield, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast Prossh. So the first time you cast him in the game, you get 6 01s. You know, if he dies and then you cast him again, you get 8. After that, it just keeps growing for however much mana you pay to cast him. So that's pretty sweet that he brings in a bunch of tokens with him. But what's really key about him is that you can sacrifice another creature to give him a +1/+0. So basically what this deck is all about is just fueling him up to become humongous and just alpha strike somebody with him. So that's my commander. As far as the land base goes, not really too much to talk about, but I did pull out a few land cards I would like to show off. The first is Kessig Wolfrun. Just by itself, it taps for a colorless, or you can pay a red and a green and pay X and tap it to give a creature +X/+0 and trample until end of turn. So that's pretty nice. It goes very good with Prossh. You know, if I need to trample over somebody's flyer to, do lethal damage or whatnot, this is a good card for that. Next is Bojuka Bog. Everybody knows Bojuka Bog. If you're playing black, you should be playing this land. It exiles someone's whole graveyard. Next one is Rogue's Passage. It's another good land that interacts well with Prossh. It will tap for a colorless, or you can pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. So if someone's got a pesky flyer that can just chump block Prossh all day, or if I don't have a Kessig Wolfrun down, this is another really good card to get in that commander damage. Next one is Verdant Catacombs. You can tap it and pay 1 life and sacrifice it to search your library for a swamp or forest card. The reason why this is legitimate is that it allows you to search for your dual lands, mainly your Ravnica dual lands, like Blood Crypt, Overgrown Tomb, or Stomping Ground in my case with this deck, which I do run all 3. The next one just kind of, is a funny little card, Kher Keep, seeing as Prossh is the Skyraider of Kher. It just seems right to have Kher Keep, and it also allows you to pay 2 and tap it to get a 0/1 red Kobold, which Prossh brings himself when he comes into play. So it's just kind of a nice little land to have along with it. And lastly, we have Grim Backwoods. It will tap for a colorless, or you can pay 2, a black and a green, and tap it to sacrifice a creature to draw a card. This deck will produce a lot of tokens. So if I have, if it's late game, I have some, tokens on the board, I have some extra mana laying around, I can invest in this to get card advantage. Okay, next we have the creature base of the deck. Like I said, a lot of these creatures will produce tokens themselves, and this first one does just that, Mitotic Slime. It's a 5-cost 4/4. When it dies, you get 2 2/2 green ooze creature tokens, and those tokens have, when they die, you put 2 1/1 green ooze creature tokens onto the field. So if I have Prossh down, I can sacrifice this to get 2 tokens to fuel him more, sacrifice those 2 tokens to get 2 more off of each one of those. It's just good. It's a fuel engine for Prossh. Next we have Champion of Stray Souls. He doesn't produce tokens, but he is pretty good in the deck. He's a 6-cost 4/4. You can pay 5 and tap him to sacrifice X other creatures to return X target creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, like I said, this deck makes a lot of tokens. If I have a lot of tokens on the board and I have some, prime real estate creatures in the graveyard that I want to get back on the board, this guy will allow me to sacrifice a bunch of tokens to get all those creatures back on the board. He also can recur himself. His second ability is pay 7, put him on top of your library from your graveyard. So he's overall a pretty good fit for the deck. Next up we have Wurmcoil Engine. I'm sure a lot of you know this card. I mean, by itself, it's just a really good card. It's a 6 cost 6/6 with Death Touch and Lifelink. But when it dies, you get 2 3/3s, one of which has Death Touch, one of which has Lifelink. So, I mean, this is also another good engine for Prossh to generate tokens. You know, I could sacrifice this to Prossh. I could sacrifice it to one of my other sacrifice outlets in the deck if I need to make Prossh bigger. So I could sacrifice him, get 2 3/3s, sacrifice those 3/3s, and so on and so on. Plus, they're also just good blockers if you need blockers. Next, we have a Harvester of Souls. He's a 6 cost 5/5 with Death Touch. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. This deck does make a lot of non-token creatures, but that also works for anybody else's creatures as well. So, I mean, if there's a board wipe, you know, someone, you know, starts going off with a combo that can wipe somebody's board, this guy will draw me a bunch of cards, which is really good. Next we have Purphoros, God of the Forge. Basically, he's in the deck because every time I get a token on the board, that token's going to shock somebody. So that's really good, because this deck will produce a lot of tokens. This guy will do a lot of damage to them. And he can also pump all of my creatures +0/+1 for 3 mana. And he's indestructible. So, I mean, he's just a overall perfect fit for this deck. Next we have Rakka Mar. I'm actually looking to replace her in the deck once I find something better. She's a 4 cost 2/2 with haste. You can pay a red and tap her to get a 3/1 red elemental creature token with haste. She's basically just there to produce tokens to fuel Prossh. Next we have Pentavis. He's a 7 cost 0/0, but he enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters. You can pay 1, remove a +1/+1 counter from him to get a 1/1 colorless flying artifact creature. So again, produce tokens, fuel for Prossh, swing in with Prossh. But he also does have a second ability which allows you to pay 1, sacrifice one of those tokens that you make off of him to put a +1/+1 counter back on him. So I mean, he's a pretty good fit for the deck. He makes tokens. You know, you can sacrifice those tokens to make him bigger. You know, he's just a good fit for the deck. Next we have Grave Titan. 6 cost 6/6 with Death Touch. Whenever he enters the field or he attacks, you get 2 2/2 black zombies. Makes tokens, beats face, has Death Touch. He's just good. Next we have Master of the Wild Hunt. He's a 4 cost 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get a 2/2 green wolf. So, you know, that's good on its own. Every upkeep I get another token to fuel Prosh's Rage. But he also has a second ability where you can tap him and tap all untapped wolves you control to basically have each of those wolves fight a creature. So, I mean, if I need some sort of removal, if I have this guy on the board and I have a lot of wolf tokens, this can potentially take out somebody's creature that I need off of the board. Next we have Krenko Mob Boss. Kind of like Marinara, just for goblins, although he doesn't have the built-in where you have to sacrifice something to get the tokens. He just taps and puts X 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the field, where X is the number of goblins you control. So by himself, with no other goblins, he'll net 1 token. And then after that, it just starts getting crazy if you don't stop him. So, a massive token generator for this deck and fuel for Prossh. Next we have Siege Gang Commander. 3 cost 2/2. When he comes in, you get 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. You know, generates tokens. He also has a second ability where you can pay 2 and sacrifice a goblin to shock a creature or player. So he's token generation and he's removal. Good fit. Next we have Ant Queen. 5 cost 5/5. Pay 2, get a 1/1 green insect creature token onto the field. Token generator, fuel for Prossh. Mycoloth. He's a 5 cost 4/4 with Devour 2. And for each, at the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 green sapling creature token into play for each +1/+1 counter on him. So if I play him and let's say I devour 5 creatures, he's going to come into play with 10 counters. On my upkeep, I'm going to get 10 tokens. He's a massive token generator for this deck. Next we have Kiki-Jiki, the Mirror Breaker. I'm sure a lot of you know him. I'm sure a lot of you hate playing against him. He's a 5-cost 2/2 with haste. You can tap him to put a creature token into play that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control. So basically what I can do with him is any of my token generators, I can tap him, put a token into play that's a copy of that token generator, get a whole bunch more tokens. He's a good fit for the deck. Next we have Orochi Eggwatcher. It's a 3-cost 1/1. You can pay 2 and a green to tap it to get a 1/1 green snake creature token, and then if you control 10 or more creatures, which is pretty easy for me to do in this deck, you may flip it. And when it's flipped, it becomes Shadaku Broodmistress, which allows you to pay a green, sacrifice a creature to give target creature +3/+3 until end of turn. So, I mean, this flipped is pretty good with Prossh. I can sacrifice a creature to make him get even bigger. Before you flip it, it's a token generator. When you flip it, it's pump for Prossh. So it's a good fit for the deck. Next we have Goblin Sharpshooter. Probably one of the best goblins ever printed. 3-cost 1/1. Sure, he doesn't untap during your untap step, but whenever another creature dies, you may untap him, and you can tap him to ping somebody for 1, a creature or a player. So this is a really good fit in this deck. If I have a lot of tokens on the field with like a sacrifice outlet, I can tap him, ping something for 1, sacrifice a creature to something, he'll untap, I can do it again. Or if I'm playing against someone else who is trying to do a token overrun deck, with a bunch of 1/1s, this will wipe their board of the tokens. So he's a really good fit. Next we have Sprouting Thrinax, 3-cost 3/3. When he dies, you get 3 1/1 green saplings, token generator. Imperious Perfect, a 3-cost 2/2 that pumps all your other elves +1/+1. You can pay a green to tap it to get a 1/1 green elf, token generator for Prossh. Jade Mage, kind of similar to the snake token generator, just a 2-cost 2/1, pay 3, get a 1/1 green sapling, produce tokens, sacrifice him to Prossh, make him big. Pawn of Ulamog, 3-cost 2/2, whenever he or another non-token creature dies, creature I control dies, I may get a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi creature token that those have. I can sacrifice it to add 1 colorless mana to my mana pool. Another token generator. Phyrexian Plaguelord. He's a pretty beast mode removal engine. He's a 5-cost 4/4. You can tap him and sacrifice him to give a creature a -4/-4, or you can sacrifice a creature. So he's a sack outlet on his own. To give a creature a -1/-1. So if there's, like a Blightsteel Colossus or a Darksteel Colossus or anything that's indestructible, you can sacrifice a bunch of tokens to this guy with his second ability to get that creature off the board. So he's a pretty good fit for the deck with the amount of tokens that I generate. Dragon Broodmother, another token generator. It's a 4/4 flying dragon. On everybody's upkeep, I get a 1/1 red and green dragon creature token. The token does have Devour too, but most of the time I don't generally bother with that. I just usually let this go around the table and just generate me a bunch of tokens. Next we have Dragonlair Spider, another token generator. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, I get a 1/1 green insect creature token onto the battlefield. So whenever someone casts a spell, I get a guy. Pretty solid. Hell's Caretaker, 4-cost 1/1. You can tap him to sacrifice a creature to res another creature from your graveyard straight to the field. The only drawback to this is that you have to use this ability during your upkeep, but generally that doesn't really matter too much. just with the amount of creatures that I can generate in this deck, he can get some pretty good things back from my graveyard. Next we have Chancellor of the Forge. This guy can be a game ender. Basically what he does is when he comes into play, I get X 1/1 red goblin creature tokens with haste, where X is the number of creatures I control. So if I have, a whole bunch of tokens, let's say I have 30 tokens on the board and him, I'm going to get 31 goblins on the board, which is just more fuel for Prossh and more games won. Next we have Deathbringer Thoctar. 6 cost 3/3. Whenever another creature dies, I may put a +1/+1 counter on him, and then I can remove a +1/+1 counter from him to ping a creature or a player for 1. So he's another removal engine. He won't get past things that are indestructible, but in the play group that I'm in, we don't have a whole lot of things that are indestructible, but he's just a good removal engine. Next we have Xenagos, God of Revels. He works very, very well with Prossh. He's a 5 cost 6/5 indestructible enchantment creature. I'm sure a lot of you know what he does, but at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains haste and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is that creature's power. So what I can do with him is I can cast Prossh, and then I can go to combat on my phase, which I will give Prossh haste, and then I can sacrifice a whole bunch of tokens if I have him on the board to make him huge. And then he's going to get +X/+X where X is his power. So if I make him huge before combat and give him this ability, he's probably going to kill somebody that turn. So this is a really good fit for the deck. Next we have Sheoldred Whispering One. 7 cost 6/6 with Swamp Walk. On your upkeep, you get to res a guy from your yard. On everybody else's upkeep, they have to sacrifice a creature. So, I mean, this is like a black staple. If you don't play this in a black deck, you probably should be. Next we have Mikaeus the Unhallowed. 6 cost 5/5 with Intimidate, which is pretty good on its own. Also, he has whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. So, if someone's playing a deck, maybe like a tribal deck, or something that plays a lot of human creatures, whenever they hit you, he's going to blow them up. Also, he gives all of your other non-human creatures +1/+1 and Undying. So if they die, they come back with a +1/+1 counter if they didn't already have one on them. So he's really good. If I have a sacrifice engine down, I can sacrifice something that generates tokens to him. It'll die, and then it'll undie and come back and make me more tokens. So he's a really good fit. Next we have Acidic Slime. Just a green staple that anybody should play in EDH. It's a 5 cost 2/2 with Death Touch. When it comes in, you blow up an artifact, enchantment, or land. It's just good removal for those pesky artifacts or enchantments, or if someone has a land down that you need to get off the board, maybe like an Imperious Sky Ruin, or even a Kessig Wolf Run, or an Orberg Tomb of Yawgmoth, anything. You just blow it up with this guy, so he's good. 2 more creatures left, and then we'll move on to the enchantment and artifact base of the deck. We have Eternal Witness, green staple, comes in, take a card back from your graveyard to your hand. If you play green, you should be playing this card. And lastly, for the creatures, we have Hornet Queen. I believe this card is very underrated and underplayed. It does cost 7 mana to play and is a 2/2 flyer, but has Death Touch. And then it brings in 4 1/1 flyers with Death Touch. So basically this is a 7 cost card that gives you 5 little mini kill spells. So I really think this card is very underrated and underplayed. I pretty much play it in any kind of green deck that I do have, because no one's going to want to attack into 5 creatures with Death Touch. Okay, so that's the creature base. Next we'll move on to the enchantment and artifact base. First up, we have Doubling Season. This is a all-star for this deck. It's a 5 cost enchantment. Basically, if an effect would put 1 or more creature tokens into play, it doubles it. If something would get 1 or more counters on it, it doubles it. That works for +1/+1 counters, loyalty counters on a planeswalker, any type of counter. If you get something, a counter on something, this will double that. And for creature tokens, it doubles the amount of creature tokens. So if I tap Krenko and I generate 10 tokens, this is going to make me generate 20 instead. All-star card for this deck. Next we have Necrogenesis, a 2-cost enchantment where you can pay 2 colorless and exile target creature card from a graveyard to get a 1/1 green sapling. This is a really good card for this deck, not just because it generates tokens, but because it can exile creature cards from somebody's graveyard. So if they have some sort of recursion engine or a reanimator deck, you can abuse this card to get those cards out of their graveyard so they can't reuse them. Malevolent Awakening. I don't really see this card played too much in black decks. I think it's a really good card. It's a 3-cost enchantment where you can pay 3 and sacrifice a creature to return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So again, if I have a lot of tokens on the board, I can pay 3, sacrifice one of those tokens to get one of my non-token creatures back from my graveyard. So I think this is a really good card for the deck. Next we have Hammer of Purphoros, 3-cost enchantment artifact that's legendary. Gives all my creatures haste. Mainly it's there just for the haste. So if I have this on the board and I cast Prossh, he has haste that turn, I can swing with him that turn. The second ability usually isn't really relevant for when I play this deck, but if someone is trying to blow up lands, I can use this in response to pay 3 and sacrifice that land to get a token. So I mean, this will give all my creatures haste. If I have to, I can use its second ability to generate tokens. Next we have Lightning Greaves. Just about everybody plays this in an EDH deck. It's a 2-cost equipment, 0 to equip. Equipped creature has haste and can't be the target of spells or abilities, or Shroud. So I mean, this is just in the deck for protection for Prossh. If I cast this early in the game on turn 2, turn 3, anytime before I can cast Prossh, I can cast him, pay 0 to equip this to him, and he can attack that turn. And now he can't be targeted, so it's a very good card. Next we have Ashnod's Altar. It's a 3-cost artifact where you can sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. This is a token generating deck. I'm going to generate a lot of tokens. This means I can generate almost an infinite amount of colorless mana for however many tokens I have on the board. So this is a very good card for the deck. If I need to cast something like a Genesis Wave, this will let me do that for a very large amount. Next we have a card everybody probably knows, Skull Clamp. It's a 1-cost equipment, 1 to equip. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever the equipped creature dies, you draw 2 cards. This deck generates a lot of 1/1, so if I pay 1, equip it to a token, it basically reads pay 1, draw 2 cards. Next we have Nim Deathmantle. This is also another card that I think is very underrated. It's a 2-cost equipment worth 4 to equip. The equipped creature gets +2/+2, has Intimidate, and is a black zombie. But the second part is the most relevant, I believe, is whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the field, you may pay 4. If you do, you return that card to the field and you attach this equipment to it. So, I mean, this is a pretty good recursion engine. If someone blows up one of your creatures and you have some extra mana laying around, especially with Ashnod's Altar, if you don't have the actual mana to tap, you can sacrifice some creatures to pay for this cost. So I think it's a very good card for this deck. Next we have Grave Pact. Whenever a creature I control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. I can make a lot of creatures die in this deck. Not with just my commander, but any of the other sacrifice outlets that I have. If I need to, wipe somebody's board, I can easily do that with this card. Next we have Parallel Lives. Kind of similar to Doubling Season, just not as good. It basically will only double the amount of tokens that you get. So I mean, it is still a very good fit for the deck. If I have both this and Doubling Season out, usually everybody just goes to Scoop Phase. Next we have Aestheticism. 5-cost enchantment. Creatures I control have hexproof, and I can pay 2 to regenerate a creature. So, this is protection for Prossh. It's protection for anybody. But if someone goes to do a board wipe with a Wrath of God, Damnation, whatever it may be, I can save whatever creatures I want to save, granted I have the mana to pay for it. Goblin Bombardment. It's a 2-cost enchantment where it allows you to sacrifice a creature to ping a creature or player for 1. So this is another free sacrifice outlet. I've actually won games off of this, just this one card, by having a ton of tokens on the board and just sacrificing them all to get somebody out of the game. So this is a very good enchantment for this deck. Next we have Dictate of Erebos. Basically like Grave Pact, just it costs 1 more and it has flash. So if someone goes to do a board wipe, I can flash this in and make it hurt for them too. We have Attrition. It's a 3-cost enchantment where you can pay a black and sacrifice a creature to destroy target non-black creature. This is a very good fit for this deck. Pay a black, sack a guy to blow somebody up, granted that it's not black. So if my opponents are playing creatures that aren't black, this is a very, very menacing removal engine. Next we have Death Reap Ritual, 4-cost enchantment with Morbid. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. A lot of creatures die in Commander, and that's for every end step. So if I sacrifice a creature on my turn, on my end step I draw a card. If creatures die on my opponent's turn, I draw a card. This will net me a lot of cards, because a lot of creatures will die when I'm playing this deck, or just when you're playing Commander in general. Next we have Darksteel Plate, another equipment to protect my general. The plate itself is indestructible, and equipped creature is indestructible. So just really good protection for my general. And lastly, for the enchantments and artifacts, we have Awakening Zone. Basically just a token generator. On every one of my upkeeps, I get a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn that I can either use for fuel for Prossh, or I can use it to produce colorless mana. Alright, next we'll go into the tutors for the deck. I only run 3. First we have Demonic Tutor. Everybody knows this card. We have Increasing Ambition. I like this card because you can flash it back, so you can potentially pay 5, cast this, get a card, or you can flash it back after you've used it and get 2 cards. So that's pretty relevant. And lastly, Diabolic Tutor. Same thing as Demonic Tutor, just costs 2 more. Okay, next we will go to the sweepers that we have in the deck. I only run 3. The first one is Blasphemous Act. If you are playing Commander and you play red, you're probably playing this card. It costs 1 colorless less for each creature on the battlefield, so a lot of times this will cost me a single red mana to cast, because I do generate a lot of tokens with this deck, and it will deal 13 damage to each creature. Not a lot of creatures will survive that unless they have Indestructible. Next we have Chain Reaction, 4-cost red sorcery, deals X damage to each creature where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. So again, if I really just need to wipe the board, this will more than likely wipe the board. There's usually always a lot of creatures on the board at any given time in a Commander game, so this is a very good red removal spell. And lastly we have Plague Wind, one-sided damnation. Destroy all creatures you don't control, they can't be regenerated. Okay, next we will go into just the regular spells that I have in the deck. I actually only run 3 that aren't mass removal or tutors. First we have Army of the Damned. Generates a whole bunch of tokens. Put 13 2/2 black zombie creature tokens on the battlefield tapped. The fact they come into play tapped really doesn't matter, because they're probably going to get sacrificed to Prossh anyways to fuel him and make him big. But you can flash it back, which will net you another 13 tokens. It does cost a lot of mana to cast, but again, if I have like a bunch of Eldrazi spawns, or if I have an Ashnod's Altar down, I can easily pay for that casting cost. Next we have Genesis Wave. I think every green deck should play this card. Costs 3 green and X, and whatever X is, you reveal that many cards from the top of your deck. And for every permanent card with cost X or less, you put it right into play. It's a ridiculously good card. And lastly, we have Violent Ultimatum, where you are able to destroy 3 target permanents. The casting cost sometimes can be a problem with it being 2 black, 3 red, and 2 green. Most of the time it's not, but generally, you know, I have so many non-basic lands in this deck that it's usually not a problem. But it blows up any 3 permanents. You know, planeswalkers, artifacts, enchantments, creatures, lands, anything. So I believe it's a pretty good fit for the deck. And lastly, we have the planeswalkers that I run. I run 3. The first one is Vraska the Unseen. Most of the time, you know, her most relevant ability is her -3, where it will destroy a non-land permanent. So if someone has a pesky, you know, enchantment or an artifact down, or even another planeswalker, you can -3 on her to blow it up. Her +1 will make it so that whenever a creature deals combat damage to her, it gets destroyed. So it may make your opponents think twice about attacking into her. And her -7, you get 3 1/1 black assassin creature tokens, and whenever one of those creatures hits your opponent, they lose the game. Generally, I don't use that ability because it's kind of a douchey thing to do, but, you know, at the very least, it will generate me more tokens to fuel Prossh. So that's that. Next, we have Karn Liberated. He's very good removal for this deck. He will exile permanents. You can either use his first +4 ability to exile a card from someone's hand. The player gets to choose that card, but the card gets exiled. The second ability, -3, exile target permanent. That's the ability that I will use more often with this guy. His minus ability, his ultimate, I generally will never ever use because it'll just kind of make people rage out. So it's not something that I really use. But it basically makes you restart the entire game. So that's kind of a douchey thing to do, but, you know, some people might use it, some people might not. I personally don't. And lastly, we have Garruk Wildspeaker, the original Garruk. He's good for this deck because he'll mana ramp, he'll generate tokens, and he'll make my creatures bigger. So he's overall a really good fit for this deck. You know, I can +1 to mana ramp, -3 to get tokens to fuel Prossh, or I can -4 and basically give my creatures overrun. So he's a really good fit for the deck. And that is it for my card choices for the deck. As far as the win condition goes, it basically goes just play Prossh, have a whole bunch of creatures on the board, sacrifice them all, make them big, and kill somebody. That's really just the main win condition of the deck. I mean, this deck can win without the commander on the board. It's just a little bit more difficult, but I do like building decks that kind of work around the commander, and this is definitely one of my better decks that do that. Just by the amount of creature tokens that I can generate to sacrifice to him to make him bigger. He's a very menacing creature to see on the board. So that is my Prossh Skyraider of Kher deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe. Anything that you would either cut from the deck and put something else in different over any of these cards, the deck list will be in the video description. So if you feel like it, leave a comment with any potential card ideas for the deck. And this is Jay with Tap and Turn Gaming, and thanks for watching.